Hey guys, welcome to The Sacred Timeline, our Marvel series going chronologically through Marvel's history. I'm Sean.
I'm Peyton.
So, naturally, the place to start with Marvel is Fantastic Four. Marvel was founded in 1939 in the wake of Superman. They were originally called Timely Comics, and the company was run by this guy, Martin Goodman. And from all accounts, Goodman was a guy who just chased trends. Like whatever was selling, he was like, that's what we're doing.
Yep, print that.
So obviously initially superheroes, their very first character was Namor, the Submariner. And then their big hit was, of course, Captain America in the early 40s. And then as DC and every other company faced the fall of superheroes post-World War II, so Goodman kind of phased superheroes out, and they started really focusing on like teen romance kind of stuff. Is a lot of what they were doing. And Stan Lee started writing for them during the Golden Age. And so he'd been working there for a while, and he kind of worked his way up to being editor-in-chief. So he's kind of creatively in charge and writing a lot of the stuff. Stan Lee was pretty miserable by the point of the late 50s, early 60s, because, again, it was just whatever was popular, Goodman made him write, and it was just ripping a bunch of stuff off. Again, it's a lot of, like, teen romance kind of comedy stuff. In the wake of Godzilla, they started doing some, like, giant monster books. And so Stan Lee was miserable and was on the verge of quitting. And in our DC series, I mentioned in our first episode, the reason we did Justice League is not only is it important for DC, it's important for Marvel. And as the story goes, and I've seen a couple people say that it might not be true, but I heard this straight out of Stan Lee's mouth in a documentary I rewatched a couple days ago. But the story I've always heard is Martin Goodman was golfing with somebody from DC, and the DC guy was bragging about how well Justice League was doing.
Ooh.
And so Goodman, went to Stan and was like, we need a superhero team book. Because Justice League is selling, we need to do that.
We need to hop on it.
Regardless of the golf story being true, the impetus to do a superhero team was the Justice League.
Right.
And how successful that book was. But I do hope the golf story is true.
Yeah.
Because if it is, DC directly leads to putting themselves in second place.
Yep.
Which is so funny to me. And again, Stan at this point is like, I want out.
Go home.
I'm absolutely miserable.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking to his wife, and his wife was like, well, instead of quitting and upending our lives, how about you write a story the way you want to write it and see how it goes? Because, like, worst comes to worst, Goodman will fire you and you want to quit anyway.
Yeah, you just want to quit anyways.
So, who cares if it doesn't work out? Like, take a swing. And Fantastic Four was the book that Stan wanted to take the swing on and kind of do a story that would excite him. Mm-hmm. And the funny thing about Fantastic Four, because obviously, he's assigned to do a superhero team book, but he doesn't use any of their superheroes. Yeah, he makes
all 4 new ones. Yeah.
But if you look at the cover, it kind of like implies that they're existing characters, because it lists them all out and then it says together for the first time. With they're literally invented here. Yeah. So clearly they're trying to make people think that these characters have been around for a little while and aren't literally brand new creations. Yeah. But
it just kind of makes it feel a little more like a whole.
Yes. And so what Stan Lee really contributes to comics is he takes what were, in terms of superheroes, he takes what were pretty one-dimensional characters and stories, and he makes them two-dimensional.
Yeah.
So we're still not quite there, but it's a lot more dynamic and narratively interesting than what was being done before. Like, we talked about this especially in our Flash episode, where Barry just has no reaction to anything. There's no dramatic tension at all.
Just oh, okay, sure, man.
He's just kind of totally pretty emotionally neutral the whole time. And that is sort of the thing that Stan really changes.
Mhm.
And even just in the invention of the characters that he and Jack Kirby create with this, the point was to sort of make very different kind of characters. Mr. Fantastic, of course, is loosely based off Plastic Man. Plastic Man had been around and was a very silly character, always very wacky, always a comedy character. And Stan liked the powers. He thought the powers were neat, and he thought it would be fun if he paired these powers that I think most people would associate with silliness because of Plastic Man, and make the character very, very serious.
Yeah.
And to the point that it would annoy other people. To the point that, like, part of the drama is that he just doesn't shut up.
Yeah.
And it's constantly, like, over-talking and, like, using a lot of big, flowery words. And that there would be people to be like, yo, shut the fuck up.
Yeah, but you need to relax.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thought behind Reed. Johnny is kind of an existing character. There was a Human Torch in the Golden Age, but he was an android. So the name is kind of a lie. Because, like, he's not a human, he's a robot.
Not a human, he's a robot.
Yeah.
So Stan Lee came in and he was like, nah, it's...
Yeah, and he like...
Human Torch.
What I imagine is he liked the imagery.
Yeah.
Of just this literal being on fire.
Yeah, just flaming.
Is really cool. And then he's like, oh, and what if I make it this, like, young, like, hothead kid?
Right.
And that's kind of, like, the interesting thing with him.
Mm.
The thing is, of course, the big sort of stroke of genius.
Right.
Just in terms of, like, new stuff that we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's this very tortured, very angry character.
Yeah.
That is hideous and hates himself and correctly blames his friends for his predicament.
Especially in this book, it's very much so, like...
Oh, yeah.
Like...
And, like, what I like about it here, what I think is really, really good, just in terms of, like, interpersonal narrative drama, is Ben is the one that is sort of the voice of reason saying, this is wrong, we shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah, that you don't know what this is going to do to us. You should not be going up there. You know something's going to go wrong.
And Reed in his hubris, and the other two in their just young naivete.
Yeah, because Invisible Woman's like, well, my husband's going, so I'm going. And Johnny's like, well, my sister's going, so I'm going. And Ben's just like, well, I have to make sure you three don't fucking die.
Yeah. And then the voice of reason is the one with, like, the biggest consequence.
Yep.
And, like, he's the one that said we should do this, we can't do this, and yet he is the one that is the most effective, negatively speaking. And so, like, immediately, like, that's just... The thing is immediately so narratively rich in comparison to what superheroes had been
before.
Because again, that's part of the idea too here is, what if they were freaks?
Yep.
Because before it's like, it's Superman. It's like the most
handsome guy you've ever seen in your life.
And Wonder Woman, who's from a island of perfect, beautiful women. And like, not even like looks, but also like in their abilities. And everybody loves them. Like there are these incredible beings. Even the ones without superpowers.
Superpowers, yeah.
And, like, the Fantastic Four are kind of a freak show.
Yeah, a little bit.
Which is kind of fun. And then Sue is just girl.
Yeah.
Like, I watched a documentary, Stan Lee has nothing to say other than, oh yeah, and then I thought it'd be cool to have a girl on the team. And he really has, and that's what's supposed to be, like, weird and, like, out there. It's like, there's a girl, and I'm like, there's a girl on the Justice League.
There's a girl.
Like, it's not that weird,
There's a whole woman on the Justice League, and she's wonderful, let me tell you.
And, like, it's a little... Because obviously, like with anything, obviously there's not great gender dynamics in the history of comics. Like, there were a small amount of super heroines. And in the Golden Age, like, Wonder Woman was the Justice Society's secretary. So, like, there is, like, a rough history. But again, like, Justice League did beat you to the punch here.
Yeah.
And, like, I soon need something other than the girl one.
The girl one,
And Stan doesn't really have anything else for her.
Yeah.
She is the girl. But Stan teams up with artist Jack Kirby to do this concept. And there is a lot of controversy around Stan and Jack and some of the other artists Stan worked with in the 60s. Because there are people who feel the artist didn't get enough credit. And that is true. Because, I mean, you've seen Stan Lee. Like, he's a hype man. He's very, like, P.T. Barnum kind of guy, like a ringleader. And he turned himself into the face of Marvel.
Yep, kind of like Steve Jobs with Apple. It's like
kind of.
Like, it doesn't matter how involved or not involved. Like, it's him.
Yeah, and Jack and Steve Ditko and whoever else you want to mention didn't get that same level of recognition.
Right.
And they felt Stan didn't credit them as much as he should have. And some people, I think, take that too far and be like, Stan didn't do anything. It's like, no, he clearly did.
No, he did.
Like, I read Stan Lee's dialogue. I know Stan Lee wrote this shit.
Yep.
For better or worse. I know.
Yeah.
But the artists don't get as much credit, especially with the way that Stan decided to work. Or the way that they decided to work together. Because what they do with this, with Fantastic Four, and continue to do as long as sort of Stan Lee is in charge, is what's called the Marvel Method, or what would become the Marvel Method, which is Stan and the artist kind of just lay out the story. So, like, Stan tells them, this is what happens. Here's a summary. And then the artist draws it entirely. And then Stan goes in and writes in the dialogue and the narration, and that's why that shit's so awkward.
Oh, okay. That's why sometimes it definitely kind of feels a little bit like, it doesn't like...
There are also times where very
match up.
Clearly the artist and Stan disagree
on what should be
happening. Like, particularly politically, I think there are some Spider-Man moments where, like, the artist intended Spider-Man to be saying one thing politically, and Stan had him say something entirely different.
The opposite, yeah.
There are also times where Stan just has characters say exactly what's literally happening before your eyes. And I think it's just so Stan Lee has something to write.
Yep.
It's like, I could see it, Stan.
Yeah.
You don't have to tell me.
That's one thing I've noticed throughout reading some of these older, like, Marvel comics and whatnot, is that not a whole lot of just panels, right? Almost every single panel, just bam, text, dialogue. Like, it feels like there's not a whole lot of just like, let the image speak for itself. It's all dialogue, no matter like how small.
Stan overwrites quite a bit.
Yeah.
He wants his words in there, for sure.
Yeah.
And there are still writers to this day that are very wordy. And there are times I think that works, and there are times where I'm like, you need to shut up.
Yeah.
And let the art do the work here.
Yeah, I feel like every now and again, you know what I mean? Obviously you have a lot to convey, but like a lot of this stuff you could probably do without and just see the image.
Yeah. And especially when it's characters being like, I'm doing this. And it's like, I can see it.
I'm looking right at you, brother. I don't...
Why are you saying this out loud? It's so dumb.
Just like the thing, just being like, I'm punching through a wall. And it's just him with his fist through a wall. And it's like, yeah.
I'm glad you said that. Thanks, buddy.
Wouldn't have been able to put that one together.
Stan Lee reminds me a lot of George Lucas, where I think they're obviously both incredibly imaginative and deserve all the credit in the world for creating or co-creating, so I don't make anybody mad, these characters in this world. And I love them both, but not my favorite writers in the world. Yeah. Not my favorite actual like pen to paper, like dialogue, pacing, that kind of more technique kind of stuff.
Right.
Both pretty rough.
It's like the one side of the coin, like they have it down pat. It's just that like technical aspect where it gets a little...
People don't talk like
shaky.
people.
Yeah.
Pacing is sometimes a little sluggish.
Yep.
But actually getting into the story, it starts utterly bizarrely, where Mr. Fantastic shoots off a flare in the sky that reads, "The Fantastic Four." And we cut to Sue Storm having tea with a friend, and she sees it, and she just immediately turns invisible.
Yep.
And leaves. And
doesn't say bye, doesn't like, no. Just friend looks away, she turns invisible and books it out the door.
And remains invisible her entire way to Reed, which makes no sense. You can just walk there. You don't need to turn invisible.
Yep.
All you're doing is freaking people out.
Yeah.
And obviously they just want to like establish their powers. I don't think this is the way to do it, but what are you going to do?
I think the cab is very funny. Like, she just gets into the back of the cab, and the dude's like, man, this sucks, dude. I hate having an empty cab. I'm not making any money. And there's just a floating dollar bill in front of him. Hey, take me here. And he's like, oh, yeah, sure. What?
Yeah, that's probably why they did it as well, is to have some, like, comedic hijinks in there. And again, that's a lot of what Stan was right. There's a lot of, like, and part of what I think makes this... What probably made it kind of work at the time was that there's a lot of kind of genres in here.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's just a lot of shit Stan was already writing. So, like, there's some comedic hijinks. There's a giant monster.
Yep.
And so it's a lot of just what Stan and Jack were already doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just now we have these kind of superheroes in the mix, and we've kind of combined some of these other genres together. Mm-hmm. But then we cut to Thing, who's in disguise, and for no reason, rips off all his clothes to go to when much easier to just keep his disguise on.
Walk there.
And walk there. And do you notice that it's... And I don't know if Jack was making a mistake and just missed some stuff, because I'm sure, like, hours and benefits weren't great, and he was on a clock. But, like, the trench coat and the hat are constantly appearing and disappearing without him actually taking it off. Like, there's a point later where, like, he rips it off here, but then he's got it back on later. Yeah. And it's like, did you put it back on? And then he rips it off, and it's like, you just want to draw him ripping it off.
Because he straight up hands it to the clerk.
He does!
After the clerk's like, hey, we don't have anything in your size. And he's like, fucking, here, now you do, asshole. Fucking leaves.
Yeah, but then later on, he's got it back on. And so he can rip it off again.
Yeah.
And then, Johnny sees it, and he's the only one that makes sense. He's like, oh, he's going to fly there.
Yeah, he's going to fly there.
That's
so
just
obviously
easy.
he has to, you know what I mean?
But he does, like, totally wreck his car, and that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Yeah, like, he could have just gotten out, flown from there. Be like, nope, melted the roof of his car, fucked up the whole car, really.
Yeah, and he gets into a fight with some, like, fighter planes on the way there, which feels totally pointless, and why, other than just to kind of show his abilities.
Yeah, show that he's cool as hell.
Yeah. And then he's about to get hit by a missile, and then this is the point where we get to see Mr. Fantastic powers. He stretches up and grabs the missile out of the air and throws it into the water, and then catches Johnny, who's about to fall. Yeah, but then when they're all in the meeting, you can see Ben has it back on. Has it back on. It's like, you took that off to come here.
Like,
you asshole.
I know you didn't buy a second one. The dude said they were at your size.
There's just extra ones at the Baxter building. And so once they're all in the room, they decide to give the origin story. And to give credit, it is probably one of the best origin stories ever. And we've kind of talked about it already, mostly from the point of view of Ben Grimm, which is there's some sort of cosmic storm that Reed wants to investigate, and they're in a rush because they need to beat the Soviets.
Yep.
So this is another thing that's just very timely.
Yeah.
The space race and all of that. And actually, my favorite is how Sue convinces Ben, which is she just calls him a chicken.
Yeah.
Like Back to the Future 2, where suddenly Marty just can't be called a chicken. Out of nowhere. It's this weird character flaw he has that he didn't have in the first movie.
Well, I mean, no one in the first movie ever called him a chicken.
That's fair.
So,
That's fair.
It's not that he didn't have it, it just didn't come up.
But yeah, she calls him a pussy. And Ben's like, I'll fucking show you, you piece of shit. And like smashes something, and Ben's like, alright, we're up. And of course they fly into space, and the radiation hits them, and they crash down to Earth, and almost immediately the powers kind of manifest. Sue turns invisible. Ben immediately mutates into the Thing.
Which, ooh. He's looked better.
Yeah,
he's looked better. It's
pretty rough. And he's not as defined as he'll get later. Like, he's not as detailed. Like, he looks kind of clay-facey. He looks a little sludgy.
Yeah.
Very just like, he's not as, like, defined as he'll be later.
But for the narrative point of, like, hey, you're supposed to see that he's just like a monster.
He is gross.
Kind of sloppy. Like, he looks disgusting.
He looks very gross.
It's very well done.
And he immediately just like, I'm going to fucking kill Reed.
I'm going to kick your ass.
And he's immediately mad. And he always has a moment where he seems kind of maybe jealous of Reed and Sue, who it's immediately established. They're not married yet, but they're engaged. And they will get married pretty quickly.
Right.
After this, that's actually one of the other unique things, is like, hey, here's a superhero married couple.
Yeah.
Because that wasn't really around. Like, they were love interest, but they were always kind of like kept at bay. Like, Superman and Lois Lane. Yep. Like, Lois wants to bang Superman, but like, they don't go there for a long time.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, unrequited love between them, because that's one of the few dramas is Superman is like, well, I can't. Because I'm Superman and I need to be Superman.
Yep.
And I think that's just Stan was writing a lot of melodramatic teen dramas, and that's kind of coming into this.
Yeah, because it definitely feels like, maybe not at the very beginning in, like, this comic, but a little bit later, and it definitely feels like they really lean into, like, the family dynamic of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Of, like, it's the superhero. It's not just a team, it's their family.
Yeah, and that's like, there right from the start, and that's one of the big sort of, what makes it different, what makes sort of the drama. And, like, we read Justice League, and, like, they're just kind of co-workers.
Yeah.
Like, they have no strong feelings about each other one way or the other. They just work together. There's a bad guy, they beat him up together.
Yeah, not even like a, hey, you want to go get a coffee after this? Nothing. Just like, we're just, hey, we did it. See you tomorrow.
Yeah, very much so. Mm-hmm. And Reed, in defending himself, kind of discovers his powers, and something that obviously ended up in that first movie, where, like, Reed kind of wraps around him, which I thought is cool.
I feel like in the movie, they at least kind of had that, like, scene where they were all kind of, like, figuring it out. Like, when Reed uses, like, his powers to grab the toilet paper. I don't know why that's the one that immediately comes to my mind.
The montage, when they're, like, getting used
show
to
the montage where they, like, but it just seems kind of weird that Reed just immediately is like, yeah, I know how my powers work. Wraps him up instantly. Like, I don't know.
It seems kind of instinctual.
Yeah.
Like, he just kind of dodges and, like, his body just goes whoosh.
Yeah, just kind of,
and then he's kind of like,
that first hit,
and, like, just goes to grab him, and then, like, his arms just kind of do it. Mm-hmm. But you're right, we don't really see them, like, test their powers or figure them out. We just kind of see them immediately get them, and then we time jump. To, well, I guess this is a flashback, so we just cut back to the present.
Yeah, back to the present.
Yeah, but Johnny gets scared and he lights on fire, and then he's like, wow, I'm fucking awesome.
Oh, dude, you guys suck.
Johnny really got the, whatever the opposite of the short end of the stick is.
Yeah, the long end of it.
The longest possible end. He got some sick-ass powers.
He got the whole stick, actually.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
Ben's this just gross-ass rock monster. It looks like he's melting on every panel. And Johnny's can fly and shoot fire.
Yeah.
Which, of course, part of their drama, too, is that Johnny's immediately like, this is the best thing ever.
Yeah. Well,
and Ben's like, this is the worst thing ever.
This is the worst thing ever. And then it's kind of like Sue and Reed in the middle, where they're like, well, you know.
They're more empathetic to Ben.
Yeah.
But they're not, like, horrible monsters. Yeah. And their powers are convenient.
Yeah.
Reed's powers they're not as cool. But they are convenient. Like, if I can just reach across the room to grab something,
it's practical.
That'd be so great.
It's a very practical superpower to just be able to just, like...
Yeah, like you said, the toilet paper thing. It's like, man, I'd love to be able to do that.
I don't know why that's a scene that sticks in my head, like, as hard as it does, but anytime I think of that movie, for some reason, that's the scene I see in my head. It's just Reed in the bathroom, just reaching across the hallway, grabbing the toilet paper. It's really funny to me. I don't know why.
But once their origin is out of the way, and that's one of the things I don't like about this, is that it's basically two stories where obviously there's sort of the main sort of plot with the villain, who is the Mole Man, and what he's doing. But then Stan just feels the need to be like, yeah, we need to get this origin story in there though, and how they got their powers. And I'm like, but it has nothing to do with anything other than this is where their powers came from.
Yeah.
And I don't like that. I think that's a little clunky and a little messy.
Yeah, it'd feel better if you kind of like one cohesive
somehow like tie it together. Like, it's one of the things I don't like about that first Spider-Man movie is that, you know, you have that sort of like first section where Peter and Goblin, regardless of each other, get their powers, and the plot doesn't really start until they get their powers. But until then, they're kind of like. And I guess it's okay because they're getting them at the same time, and so they're just on this like converging path. It's not that bad.
So that it kind of like does one of these numbers, whereas this, it's literally just like, hey, everybody, come meet up. We're about to go be superheroes. Here's their entire backstory. Hey, we're about to go be superheroes. Now let's go do it.
Yeah. Like, whereas instead, it might have been better to just do their origin, and somehow that sends them on an adventure with the Mole Man.
Yeah, take them after the Mole Man.
Yeah, it's just kind of clunky. But Reed, you know, he has these pictures of like, hey, there are these atomic sites that are being attacked.
Yep.
And we see that what they're being attacked by are kaijus. Because that's what Stan Lee and Jack Kirby were doing at the time. I mean, giant monsters were just in. Like, there were so many B movies.
Yep.
That were just any giant, like any insect you can think of, there was a giant monster movie about it.
Giant monster of it, yep.
But they decide that they're going to look into this and they're going to deal with it. And so they go to this island that's called the Monster Isle.
Mm-hmm.
And almost immediately they're attacked by this crazy ass monster that's got like 3 heads. And it's really cool. And clearly this is what I think Jack Kirby wants to do. Like,
I think it's a little funny that it's just like, yeah, it's monster. Like, they don't hype it up very much. It's not very, like, alluded to. It's just like, well, there's giant monsters. They have to be coming from Monster Isle.
Yeah.
Like, it just makes sense. And it's like, that's so... Why have we not dealt with this yet? Why is it...
Well, it's the first story.
Like, why are we waiting until the monsters are actively attacking before maybe, like, going to the island? Maybe stop them to begin with?
I don't know if it's... Nope, Reed says he knows exactly what it is, but it seems like more like a... Yeah, because Ben says back in his trench coat that it's a fairy tale.
Yeah.
So this is more like a thing that's like rumored. Yeah, like there's like an urban legend of a Monster Isle.
Yeah.
And now we have proof that it's real.
Yeah.
So we're going to go investigate this island. Mm-hmm. They fight a monster and the 4 get separated. And... Johnny and Reed get knocked out and they wake up in these stupid suits and they're just like faced with like miles upon miles of diamonds. And they are met by the villain of the story, who, like I said, is the Mole Man. And then we cut back to Sorry, go ahead.
Can I just say, I love the way he looks. He just looks so silly in that panel. It's really good.
He's got like those... He's literally wearing the 3D glasses, like the old 3D glasses, the like paper ones. That's literally what his mask is. Well, mask, but like, whatever. We cut back to Sue and Ben so that Ben can rip his trench coat off again and fight a giant monster. Sue doesn't do much. And then...
She hangs out.
We're back to the Mole Man, who's kind of explaining who he is and that he wants to take over the world.
Yep.
And go ahead.
I really like his backstory and just how simple and straight to the point it is. Like,
sure.
It's just, I was ugly, so I'm just an outcast of society. Mm-hmm. And then I was on a boat and it just so happened to crash here. And now, for some reason, I'm in charge of the monsters and can tell them what to do just because I showed up and was kind of ugly.
Yeah, he says he mastered the creatures.
Yeah.
He doesn't explain how, but I actually do really like the Mole Man.
Mm-hmm.
His backstory and that he's this ugly guy that was totally rejected by society. Because one of our heroes is there's an immediate sort of like parallel there. Between Mole Man and the Thing, who is this hideous monster that society fears and rejects.
Mm.
And Sue and Ben, they kind of find their friends and the Mole Man, and Thing charges in, ripping off his trench coat again. Even
so there was actually a panel. So he rips it off, fights the monster, and then you can see in this tiny
in the shadows,
he has it back on. He put it back on after he got done fighting the monster.
He threw the blue rock monster into the ocean and then got dressed.
And then put it back on. It was like, all right, we can go now.
The other thing I noticed about him that he reminds me of, even though this is a character that hasn't been invented yet, he looks a lot like Kingpin. Because he's running around in like this like purple like diaper kind of thing. And just his build and the way he looks looks like a weird... Like, he looks like Kingpin to me. Like, obviously, he's an orange rock monster, but, like, just the way he's drawn and his build here reminds me more of Kingpin than what I typically think of with the Thing. The story kind of continues and ends pretty abruptly. Mole Man tries to escape. They go after him. He kind of summons his monsters. But the 4... And is it the 4 or is it the monsters that cause a cave-in? No, Johnny causes a rock slide that seals the monsters and the Mole Man underneath the island underground. And that's pretty much the end of the story.
Which is crazy. Because, Mole Man, it literally shows like a map of the world. And Mole Man has like tunnels underneath all these major nuclear places. Yes. Like he's absolutely not trapped in there. Like, these tunnels are massive.
Yeah.
But there's a line in there where they're like, I don't think we're ever going to see him again. Like, tunnel caved in. He's probably trapped under there for the rest of his life. But it's like, there are several holes to the surface.
Yeah, he should have several places because that's his plan.
Because that's how he got the nuclear reactors. Is shows them coming up out of the holes and dragging them down. So like he can absolutely just get out.
Yeah, and that's his entire plan. Is that we have all these access points. My monsters are gonna, and they lead to every major city.
Yep.
And so my monsters are just going to wreak havoc and destroy the world, basically. So it's not so much to take over the world, so much as destroy
the world.
The world outside of Monster Island. The Monster Isle, sorry. The world that rejected me.
Yep.
And so it's like a vengeance kind of thing.
Yeah, it's just silly that's how they stop it, when in reality, like, oh no, I guess I'll just go
out one of those other eight holes I blew up.
Like they're already. That's why they're there, so that we can go up there and destroy. Like he still can absolutely just do it.
Yeah. And it's such an abrupt ending, and it just feels like they just ran out of pages and just went, we're done.
I think that's what it is they probably had a longer like actual story planned, but either Stan or Kirby was like, oh shit, we should probably like give him a backstory really quick, so they just had to waste,
they need to get the origin in there, and that took up a lot of real estate.
Took up like 5 out of the 26 pages.
It just feels like they were just riffing.
Yeah.
And then they got to the end and they're like, oh, I guess it's over.
Yeah.
So I guess you just have to sort of stop.
Yeah.
Like they were just sort of going, and then they got to a point where like, oh, well, it has to stop there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the first Fantastic Four story. And it was an immediate hit. Like it just took off like a rocket, and you could sort of see why. Like we said, it's more dimensional than a lot of what was being put out at the time. It's got a lot of genre mixes in there that are really, I think, exciting.
Yeah.
There's some obviously, I don't want to say teens because they're obviously not teenagers, but there's that kind of like
that drama
soap opera. It's very soap opera. Stan Lee makes comic books. Soap operas.
Yep.
These long stretches of stories about these people and the crazy things that happen in their lives and their relationships and all of that kind of stuff. Like very much he creates it. He makes superhero comic books very melodramatic soap operas.
Yep.
Again, because so much of it is like the love story between Reed and Sue and ultimately their marriage and the struggles they have and all that kind of stuff. But then you've got like kaiju giant monsters.
Yep.
And again, I think a lot of that's Kirby. I think because we'll talk a lot about Kirby in both.
Yeah.
Our DC series and Marvel series. And he was just someone that always wanted to do very big, crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And that's just, a lot of that is him.
Yeah. And I mean, like, it makes sense. Like, it definitely sells. You know what I mean? Like, I also feel like, to a certain degree, at least, I guess he's, like, more the artist than anything, but, like, to a degree, it's almost easier to write a giant monster than it is to write, like, a person. You know, like, you don't really have to give a monster motivation.
Sure, he's a giant monster, he's gonna break things.
Yeah, big monster, he breaks stuff. That's what he does.
No, yeah.
And then that just gives you more kind of real estate to work with, like, having the characters go through things. So I feel like almost it's, like, sometimes you can have a little more fun with doing a giant monster rather than, like, a more involved villain.
And I think he might have just wanted to draw giant monsters, and that was fun. And also, it was in.
Yeah.
It was an in thing. It was popular. Everybody was doing it.
Yeah.
Like, and that's part of why it appealed. That's a lot of what Fantastic Four was. A lot of just, it was very of the time, very timely, and it just sort of clicked. And obviously, like, Marvel was done. Like, timely comics. Like, they were done. They were doing shit. Like,
it was scraping the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah, just kind of whatever. Yeah. And obviously, this makes them number one.
Yep. Straight to the
top dog. Like, over the course of the 60s, they will, of course, rebrand into Marvel Comics. Fantastic Four is the book of the 60s. Like, this is their flagship title. Everything revolves around this. They introduced a lot of characters in this. Obviously, characters you associate with Fantastic Four.
Right.
They bring back Namor. And I mean, anything people know about Namor comes from his interactions with the Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
And his relationship with Sue and that whole thing. Black Panther is introduced in Fantastic Four.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, his first appearance, I'm pretty sure, is in an issue of Fantastic Four.
That's kind of dope.
Yeah, the Inhumans, they show up in Fantastic Four first. They will obviously create things like the Silver Surfer and Galactus, Doctor Doom.
Yeah.
And
the real heavy hitters, yeah.
Yeah. And it's just a real defining moment in comic book history, and obviously puts Marvel on the path to being the biggest thing in comics, and at a certain point, the biggest thing in entertainment.
Yep.
You know, at the height of the MCU.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that'll do it for this episode. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.
See ya.